Hi guys, welcome to your Constitutional Era videocast. So we began with the Confederation and leading us all the way to the Constitution. So during the Revolution, the Continental Congress created the Articles of Confederation as our first government. And remember, it created a weak federal government and gave most powers to the states because they feared a strong monarchy. Keep that in mind. The founders were very suspicious of a strong central government after their experiences with Britain. So some of the weaknesses, and you have that in your notes page, it should be on page 42, but Congress had no power to collect taxes, no power to regulate foreign trade, no power to enforce laws. They needed 9 states in order to enact any laws. And then in order to approve amendments, that's basically making changes to the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states had to agree. And the government also had no executive branch, and there was no national court system. So you need to keep that in mind. So the outcome, government was always short on money. Quarrels would break out among the states. The government depended on the states for law enforcement. It was difficult to enact laws. There was no practical way to change the powers of government, and there was no effective way to coordinate the government, the work of the government, and the central government had no way to settle disputes among the states. Now, hopefully you remember Shays' Rebellion. In 1787, a group of angry Massachusetts farmers rebelled over taxes. The states asked for help from the federal government, but because the Articles, the federal government was unable to get involved. Remember, they could not deal with any disputes among the states. That was one of their weaknesses. And this was a strong signal to the nation, that a new government was needed. And this set the scene for the states to call for a meeting to discuss changing the government. This meeting comes to be called the Constitutional Convention. So in 1787, our founding fathers met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to discuss changes to our government. And they ended up throwing out the Articles and creating a brand new governing document, which we call the Constitution. Now, important people there were, of course, General Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, who is known today as the father of the Constitution. So the first debate pitted large states against small states, and the question was, how would they decide how many votes a state would get in the new government? The large states like Virginia liked the Virginia Plan, which was based on population. More people equals more votes. The small states like the New Jersey Plan, in which all states were equal with 1 vote regardless of the population. So New Jersey versus the Virginia Plan. And Connecticut came up with a great compromise. And the great compromise was 2-house legislature, which is bicameral, equal representation in the upper house of Congress, such as in the Senate. So there would be 2 people from every state representing that state in the Senate, and representation in the lower house of Congress, which today we call the House of Representatives, would be proportional to how many people were in that state. So another debate involved the issue of slavery. Do slaves count as part of the population? This question is going to put the northern and the southern states at odds. So we're starting to see a development between the regions, kind of a negativity between the northern region and the southern region. The North believed they should be counted, but since the South treated them as property, then that number should be used to figure in taxes. The South believed they should be counted to give the southern states a larger population, and this would mean more votes in Congress. So there was a compromise. It was northern states versus southern states, and the compromise was called the 3/5 compromise. And if you remember, you drew that on the back of your notes page. The 3/5 of slaves counted as population in determining representation to the House of Representatives. 3/5 of the slaves would be counted for the purpose of determining taxation. So if you take 5 slaves, how many would you count of those 5 slaves toward representation and taxation? You would count 3. So it took many months and a great deal of compromising to work out a plan on which most would agree. The matter would now go before the states, and it was decided that 9 states would be needed to ratify the Constitution, and it would take more debate and the promise of a Bill of Rights in order to gain unanimous approval. So the next thing we're going to discuss was the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. It would now be up to the states to decide. 9 of the 13 would have to approve to make this Constitution our new government. People began taking sides over the ratification of the Constitution. So you have your Federalists, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, versus your Anti-Federalists, so that's against federalism or a strong central government, and that was Henry, Mason, and John Adams. So the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist views. So the Federalist view on the Constitution was in favor, anti would be against. The Federalists wanted to completely abandon the Articles of Confederation. The Anti-Federalists just wanted it fixed, changed or fixed. So power of the states, the Federalists wanted to curb power of states by creating a central government. And the Anti-Federalists wanted to keep the state power the highest. Federalists saw no need for a Bill of Rights. State constitutions already gave a Bill of Rights. The Anti-Federalists' lack of a Bill of Rights was a threat to liberties. That's what they believed. Federalists believed in a large republic. Anti-Federalists believed that a small republic was best. Majority of the people that supported the Federalist view were wealthy, but some common citizens also agreed. For the Anti-Federalists, it was mostly small farmers and debtors. So, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay began to write the Federalist Papers, and these were a series of essays arguing for the Constitution. And then, therefore, the Anti-Federalists came up with their own papers, and they wrote a series of essays arguing against the Constitution. 9 states agreed, but to gain the vote of the 4 remaining states, Federalists had to promise to add a Bill of Rights. And they did so in 1791. United we stand, and divided we fall. All right, so the 7 principles are basically the ideas behind the Constitution. So they may not be explicitly stated in the Constitution, but they are the general overarching principles that guide its thinking. All right, and these are popular sovereignty, republicanism, federalism, separation of powers, checks and balances, limited government, individual rights. And we learned hand signals to remember all of these. So republicanism, and these were some of your vocabulary words as well, is the idea that we should be able to vote to choose representatives who make our laws. Limited government is the idea that no one is above the law. The people who make the laws have to obey those same laws. Remember the Magna Carta, 1215, where the nobles forced King John to sign it to limit his power. Popular sovereignty is the idea that all government power comes from the people. People power. How I exercise that is voting. And so we have midterm elections this year. Individual rights is the idea that government should be protecting our natural inalienable rights instead of abusing those. And if you remember, those are our ability to seek life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are natural, God-given rights. Federalism is the idea that power should be shared between the federal and the state government. So if you noticed here, the national or federal government has these strict powers. States have these strict powers, but they also share some powers. And this represents the term federalism, or the sharing of powers. Checks and balances is the idea that each branch should be able to control the other branches. And this keeps one branch from becoming too powerful. So this is where the president can be impeached. And we actually worked on this in class. So you have the 3 branches, and each one of these shows some of the things that they can do to one another in order to keep them in check. Separation of powers is the idea that all government should be divided among the 3 branches. So separating of powers is that powers should be divided. Checks and balances is that they should check each other. So let's look at the document itself. We the people of the United States. The preamble is the introduction to the Constitution. It lays out the 6 goals of the Constitution. So we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. 2, establish justice. 3, ensure domestic tranquility. 4, provide for the common defense. 5, promote the general welfare. And 6, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So Articles 1, 2, and 3 set up the 3 branches of government. Main job, requirements for office, and other powers are listed in these articles. And this covers the principle of separation of powers and checks and balances. And these are things that you do need to know. Article 4 deals with the state. It sets forth the idea of cooperation among the states, and they will recognize each other's records and laws. And they will hold each other to that standard. So Article 4 deals with the states. Article 5 deals with amendment process. Basically changes to the Constitution, explains how the Constitution can be changed. So proposal, a constitutional amendment can be proposed in 1 or 2 ways. So by 2/3 of the members of both House and Senate can bring up a proposal or a change to the Constitution, or at a convention if called by 2/3 of the states. In order to ratify the Constitution, after amendment is proposed here, it must be ratified, and this can be done in 1 or 2 ways. And basically ratification is making the legal change. So it can be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or by 3/4 of the ratifying convention in the states. Article 6 explains that the Constitution or federal government is the supreme law of the land, and all state and local laws must follow the Constitution. And Article 7, how the Constitution would be ratified. It would take the approval of 9 of the 13 states to make it official. So let's talk about the amendments. And we learned hand signals for these 2. So the first amendment is the freedom of religion, press, speech, assembly, petition. The second one is the right to bear arms. The third one is no quartering of soldiers. The fourth one is no illegal searches or seizures, so you have to come with a warrant. The fifth one is no double jeopardy. You cannot be taken to court twice for the same crime. It is a due process amendment as well. 6 is a right to a speedy trial. 7 is a right to a trial by jury. 8 is no cruel or unusual punishment. 9 is the 9th Amendment states that citizens are still granted rights that are not explicitly listed in the U.S. Constitution, such as the right to get married or the right to choose whatever job you want. And 10, remember the 10th Amendment, states have rights too. So whatever is not stated in the Constitution is given to the people and the states. All right, so these are some of the important people and terms. If you want to pause the video now and go through each one, I would highly recommend it. Many of these are actually some of your vocabulary that you had a quiz on, you had to do the work on. But I would also highly suggest you pause this and make flashcards, because these are things that you need to know as a citizen of America, as an 8th grader, and especially for the STAR test. And I would also pause here and practice some of these STAR questions. Some of these we may have actually done, or we have done, during our STAR warm-up question of the day. But this is not going to hurt you to go through these. And remember, STAR questions are made not because you recognize these exactly, but it's to make you think and process it. And so by being able to be successful in these shows you that you truly understand the concept. So here's another one. I would suggest you pause this and go through each of these as well. And here is another one. And another one. Excellent. Okay. All right, guys, I'm proud of you for taking the time to listen to this video cast. As usual, always eat well, get a good night's rest, review your academic notebook, listen to the review podcast, do the review sheet, show up for class, do the work assigned. I promise you I never give you busy work. And I just want you to know I'm enjoying this year and I'm proud of all of you. See you soon.